So I've mentioned before that we're dwelling in a society which is very much a Scanadarkly-esque society. Indeed, we are tracked and traced and scanned, all of our movements, all of our text messages, our emails, everything. We have no freedom from the intelligence networks that pretty much operate. Indeed, what is MI6 and MI5 but a continuation of the Jesuit confessional? There is little difference. Indeed, of course, with MI5 and MI6 being run by Petty Fitzmaurice, a Jesuit dynasty, it's of absolutely no surprise that MI5 and MI6 operate in a Jesuitical manner, just as the CIA do. Indeed, the CIA are dominated by the Knights of Malta, and the original CIA was very much indebted to Operation Paperclip, and the original CIA was a mix of the OSS and the Nazi SS, what with the Vatican and the American intelligence services bringing many Nazis across to America specifically to set up the CIA and to continue MK-Ultra, and it is MK-Ultra that has created the conditions whereby we live in an Scanadarkly-esque society today. It is effectively MK-Ultra on a societal scale, in combination with the mind control programs which the Jesuits, Jesuitical, Illuminati, Psychiatric combine have decreed must be put into place, whereby we are losing our freedoms, our freedom of thought, our freedom of speech, and of course with operations going on such as Operation Domain, whereby we may be force-fed drugs. The whole society, I'm talking here, not just us schizos and neurotics, the whole society may be fed drugs to keep them happy in their servitude, in the same way that the Jesuits poisoned the Guarani, well, didn't poison, they force-doped the Guarani Indians during the Paraguayan reductions with coca leaf so that they would be completely content in their servitude, because they were basically high the whole time. And indeed, any of us that the most likely people to start telling the truth in this society are the schizophrenics, and it is we who are force-doped, because that is their way of controlling us. It is effectively a pharmaceutical straitjacket to make us as normal for society as they can possibly make us. Indeed, it is a continuation of the Spanish Inquisition. It is nothing more than inquisitional tactics. We are treated as if we were heretics, and we are, instead of being tortured, we are force-doped and labelled. Thus nobody would trust our words, because the average member of society is not going to take the words of a schizophrenic seriously, and that is the way that the Jesuit Illuminati Psychiatric combine wish things to be. They wish for nobody to listen to the truth. And anybody who is seeking the truth ends up in the realm of the alternative media, which is itself the domain of one Frederick Copplestone, S.J., a Jesuit who was given the task of pretty much creating an alternative media, whereby all of the angles of the alternative media would eventually lead back into a Jesuitical mind control matrix, whereby one cannot escape. There is no truth to be found there whatsoever. The only truth is in the asylums and the schizophrenics, and we are being pushed to the edge of society. Thus our truth is not spoken. We cannot get our truth out. And this is the way that they wish it to be. And even so, we now have the New Age movement, which was the creation of one Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, S.J. When I say S.J., it means Society of Jesus. It means that is a member of the Jesuit order. The New Age movement was created by the Jesuit order specifically to ensnare hippie types. And that furthers the agenda which is dominated by the Catholic Percy dynasty of Britain. The Percy family have always been diehard Catholics, and they are heading an alliance of divine right Catholicism mixed with eugenics and social Darwinism, whereby they are using the New Age movement as mouthpieces for a Malthusian depopulationist agenda. As the powers that be wish to depopulate the earth by a certain amount before they institute their full-on slavocracy, which will be another extension of the empire. When I talk of the empire, I talk of it in Phil K. Dickian terms of the Roman Empire having always been, and that time stopped in 70 AD, and all civilizations in Europe and the West, as it were, since then have been nothing more than a shape-shifting Roman Empire. It's been different people at the top, but it's been Romanoid. Indeed, what the Jesuit Illuminati psychiatric axis wish to implement is another Romanoid structure. It's a Romanoid Slavocracy. And returning to the CIA is dominated by Knights of Malta. You have Wild Bill Donovan and Alan Dulles, McCone, Angleton, all of these people, the Knights of Malta. And as I've stated, the Vatican, the American intelligence services, and the Nazis were all enmeshed together during the rat lines, and the rat lines were dominated by Catholic priests funneling fascists out of Europe and across to South America, and many across to North America in Operation Paperclip, overseen by many Catholic members of the OSS, such as Wild Bill Donovan and James Angleton, especially those characters. And this then led on to MK-Ultra, and MK-Ultra itself led on to further mind control experiments, which has created the conditions whereby we have an Aescana Darkly-esque society now that we dwell in, and another Romanoid system is in place through the psychiatric profession, whereby all of us truthers are pushed to the sides as heretics, useless eaters, whatever they wish to call us, and we are stigmatized so much that our words are seen as blasphemous or ridiculous. Basically, we are not listened to, we are seen as subversives, and general society does not want to know us. And so we are forced into a life of solitude, living on the edge of society, and we are forced to in desperation, make these videos where people will probably just mock us and see us as lunatics because this guy is not actually talking any sense. He's just rambling schizoid stuff. He's a psych ward patient, whatever, you know, but we keep going. The Combine must be smashed. And this MK-Ultra continues. A lot of people keep trying to tell me that MK-Ultra finished in the 70s when people found out about it. It hasn't. It still goes on today. It's even more so. It's because of the advances in technology, the levels that the system can operate on in terms of mind control experimentation is unbelievable. Of course, I mentioned in my video yesterday the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations. It's run directly by the Jesuits, and that influences the social engineering and the complete brainwashing of the populace and the dumbing down of the populace. Indeed, the Jesuits have had complete control over all British affairs since 1815. Indeed, with the Rothschilds buying up the British economy for the Jesuits in 1815 was just the icing on the cake, because during the period of 1773 to 1815 the Jesuits gradually took over Britain in a very, very clever manner, and they had control of King George III basically within 5 years of the beginning of the colonisation. And it was quite interesting because the Jesuits had been involved before in attempting to replace the Hanoverians initially with the Stuart dynasty once again. which was a Catholic dynasty. They were intending to put the Catholics back on the throne, and a lot of Scottish Rite Freemasonry had a lot to do with that aim, but then they realised instead of putting the Jacobite Stuart kings back on the throne, they could merely manipulate the Hanoverians, and this they did. They manipulated Hanoverians through manipulating King George III, and since then the British monarchy has been completely beholden to the Jesuits, but indeed the British monarchy has been beholden to Rome since 1215, when King John signed the Magna Carta, and really pissed off Pope Innocent III. He was forced to render the throne, the monarchy, and the crown corporation to the papacy forever. Thus, the British throne has always been in the hands of Rome. But the Jesuits didn't get complete control of the papacy until 1814. Thus, only since 1814 has Britain been a Jesuit fiefdom, and they were attempting to create that Jesuit fiefdom during the period of colonisation between 1773 and 1814-1815, and they managed to get control of King George III, and then it was completely legitimate by 1814, once they had control of the White Pope, who was Pope Pius VII at the time. They therefore had complete rule over Britain as a Jesuit fief, and indeed certain areas of Britain were already Jesuit dominated fiefs, as I've been through before, especially Wiltshire, with Wiltshire being split between two Jesuit fiefdoms, in the north of Wiltshire, the Marquis of Lansdowne and his fiefdom, and he is Petty Fitzmaurice, and the Pettys have always been a Jesuit dynasty. And then from Devizes south, the fiefdom of the Cecil dynasty, the Marquis of Salisbury, the Cecil family. They have always been a Jesuit dynasty ever since 1545, intermarriage with the Pallavicinis. The Pallavicinis have always overseen the Cecils. The Cecils have always been outwardly Protestant, but they are a Jesuit dynasty and must not be trusted, and indeed this is why Wiltshire is the nerve centre of the Jesuit power in Britain, because we have the MI6, MI5 war rooms beneath Bowood House, and we have Porton Down, which is the experimental centre of chemical weapons, biological weapons, mutants. I don't know what's going on in there, but something pretty awful. Indeed, there was a lot of MK-Ultra experimentation done in Porton Down during the 50s and 60s. There were quite a few deaths, and I believe here in Devizes itself, Roundway Hospital was used for MK-Ultra experiments on the mentally ill during the 50s and 60s, and I find MK-Ultra to be absolutely diabolical. And it proves to me even further that the psychiatric profession is completely intertwined with the Jesuit Illuminati plot. Thus it is the Jesuit Illuminati Psychiatric Combine, and indeed the MK-Ultra experiments were completely linked in with Operation Paperclip, so it's all Nazi science, and indeed a lot of what is going on in Porton Down is undoubtedly Nazi science. And it all links in because the eventual aim is a Romanoid Slavocracy, and I believe it will take the form of something very similar to the Paraguayan reductions of the Jesuits, as Jesuits set up in South America during the period of 1600 to 1750, which eventually led to their suppression after the Spanish and Portuguese empires discovered the wealth of the reductions, which was being paid back into the Jesuit war chests for world dominion rather than any tithes or tributes being given to the Spanish and Portuguese empires. So that was how the suppression of the Jesuits began. And then 1773 occurred, and of course we had the birth of the Bavarian Illuminati with Giuseppe Balsamo and Adam Weishaupt being chosen by Lorenzo Ricci and Lord Shelburne, William Petty. And of course the Illuminati brought forth the old Alumbrados war plans for complete world domination, and the Jesuit plans were to overturn the monarchies that had suppressed them and to completely bankrupt the Catholic Church so that they'd be able to take over the papacy. This was all occurred during the period of their suppression, and they were completely successful in all of their aims. And since 1814, the Jesuits' thrust has no longer been for the Counter-Reformation as it was from the period of the 1534 up until 1814. It's been the Jesuit Illuminati, and later adding the psychiatric element. That combine has been seeking world dominion and has been doing so since 1814, and as I've stated, it shall be a perhaps global equivalent of the Paraguayan reductions, but it means to be said, will it be agrarian or will it be technocratic? We do not know, or will it be a mix of both? But that is a means to be said. At the moment, all I can say is that we are living basically in Philip K. Dick's A Scanner Darkly novel. There are drugs everywhere, and they are being used for mind control because people do not know how to use them properly. I use drugs for mind expansion, and am aware of how to, but the average kid is just taking MDMA to escape. And of course, the penultimate truth about the war in Syria is that war is being perpetuated because that is the main drug route for MDMA from Israel to get into Europe. And the Massimo and the Medici families, both Jesuit dynasties, well, they are associated with the Jesuits anyway. They are what is called the Grey Jesuit dynasties. And they dominate that drugs route, which is known as the M5 within the drugs trade world. And indeed, that war in Syria is being perpetuated by all sides to keep the MDMA trade going, because all MDMA that we see on this pills, ecstasy pills, etc., that we see on the streets of England, for instance, are synthesized in Israel, and it goes from there straight up through Syria. So that war needs to keep going so that more and more drugs can get through. And people might think it's for oil or some other geopolitical aims, but that is bullshit. It's a war for keeping the narcotics route of the MDMA trade open to perpetuate the A Scanner Darkly society we are living in today, which has been completely constructed by the Jesuit Illuminati Psychiatric Combine, which rules in the shadows. We have the visible power structure of the papacy and the monarchy and the elements of the ultra-aristocracy, and of course the Knights of Malta, which are in more visible positions than the Jesuits. The Jesuits are much more in the background, but there are levels, different echelons of the power structure. And of course the White Pope is merely a puppet. Even though this White Pope is actually a Jesuit, he remains a puppet of Arturo Sosa S.J., Arturo Sosa S.J. being the current Black Pope, the superior general of the Jesuit order. And it is all of these characters and all of these situations that are perpetuating an A Scanner Darkly as society. And unfortunately, there's little we can do apart from make these videos, because nobody is ready to listen, and we schizophrenics keep getting put to the side and treated as heretics. Just Thomas Schatz, in his book comparing the modern psychiatric profession to the Spanish Inquisition, is completely truthful. The psychiatric profession is another Romanoid structure. It's an extension of the Jesuit order, basically. It's part of that combine. It is decreed by the Jesuit order. It has its place. It's just the Jesuit confessional, and we are being squeezed and squeezed and squeezed and doled out, force doped, and what can we do? All we can do is make these videos, and all I'm going to say is this is A Scanner Darkly. Now I'm going to fade away.